Hello, you're here with Kevin and Brandon on my podcast. This is the first podcast episode I'm doing that is live on camera. And what I'm going to talk about today is having Asperger's and the struggles and even the triumphs that I've had. And let me talk about what Asperger's is first. It is a high functioning form of autism. Doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with your intelligence, doesn't mean that at all. It just means that you think a little bit differently and you express yourself a little bit differently. Now, for many years, I thought it was the worst thing in the world to have because I always felt different from everybody, and I always saw things from a different perspective, and I always did things that were a little bit different, such as remembering numbers, dates, and times and such. Now, those were some of the challenges I had, such as with fitting in and such. Now, I have had my triumphs with Asperger's, such as doing really well on tests because of how much I retain information and remembering things that were very important to me. And there is a resolution. There always is a resolution. You don't have to feel like you're cursed, and you can do anything you want, even if you do have Asperger's or high functioning autism. Now, I'm first going to talk about how it was hard for me to get social cues growing up and throughout my adult life as well, because it was hard for me to read social cues and get what people were saying, whether it was benevolent or not so benevolent. And it made it a bit hard for me because people were just kind of like a little ary of me sometimes because I was just different. And it wasn't so natural for me to express emotions. That was one of the things that made it hard for me to fit in because I couldn't laugh like other people could. And it was something I always admired and always envied because it wasn't something I had. Now, one of the things with Asperger's, I will say, is having OCD. And that's my experience because I can be very obsessive compulsive with a lot of things. And I can just focus and fixate on this one thing when there's a million other things going on. And that is one of the things that comes with high functioning autism. And there is some other things as well, such as if you have Asperger's, most likely you're going to be more sensitive to gluten, which hurts my stomach a bit, like such as breads and such. I can't really eat anything that's high in gluten, and that's a physical element of Asperger's. And many people don't know where autism comes from. There are some theories that people whose mother took antidepressants while they were pregnant with them, people say that could be a source of where autism comes from, but there's really no validity to prove that. Now, the thing that I struggled the very most with having Asperger's and high functioning autism is that I always felt like an outsider. Growing up, I always felt like I was an alien, like I didn't really belong and I was just so weird. And I I will say I do have a great personality, but I always for a long time I had felt like that having Asperger's was like a stigma and that no one could understand and no one would understand, even though nowadays way more people are much more understanding of people that have it. And people growing up, they didn't seem to understand me, and it would make me feel bad, and it would kind of make me bitter because I felt like I was cursed with having Asperger's and high functioning autism. It wasn't something that I was very open about for a long time. Nowadays, I am more open about it than I've ever been before. I'm not too open about it because there are some people out there that still don't understand, unfortunately. but that number is significantly less than I thought it was when I was growing up and in my early adult years. And I will say this, it was hard for me to fit in growing up and even throughout my adult life. And those were things I had to work on. And I knew that I could do it. I knew I could do it, but I just didn't know how. And the one thing that didn't cross my mind was that practice makes perfect, because someone with Asperger's is naturally introverted usually. Usually they're naturally introverted, and so they don't get to get their feet wet with other people quite often, and that will make it harder for them in the long run. I mean, if you have high functioning autism and you're afraid of what people are going to think of you, don't be. I mean, especially if you want to have more friends and you want to have more people in your circle, you just have to put yourself out there. And more often than not, you eventually find a group of people that really like you. That is my experience with the whole thing. And it got better actually in my later years, because when people are older, they tend to understand you more versus when they're young and they're not quite mature enough to comprehend something such as Asperger's and high functioning autism. They immediately think, oh, you're this or that, and it's really not the case. I mean, because like I said, people with Asperger's, there's nothing wrong with their intelligence. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with their intelligence. It's just they conduct themselves differently and think a little bit differently. You know, growing up, I will say there were some people who did bully me, and it wasn't a pleasant experience. It never is, and you know, I had to accept years later. It took me actually years later to accept that this is what I have and this is who I am. And acceptance is a key essential if you want to get anywhere in life, because you have to accept your situation first before you can change it. And I had to accept that I had autism. That was the main thing I had to accept. For many years I said that I had bipolar or something, because I felt like there was just like this huge stigma ridden with having autism and having Asperger's. And you know what? It's not bad having it at all. It's not. I actually feel quite comfortable in my own skin finally, and which is why I'm doing this podcast discussing it, because I want to give people some more hope, and maybe there's someone out there who feels very vulnerable and very insecure for having high functioning autism, and maybe they can watch me on here talking about it and talking so freely about having it, and they can realize, well, Kevin went through the same thing and he's not doing too bad. He's actually doing pretty all right. So what I'm going to say next is you have to work through having high functioning autism and Asperger's, because like I said, practice makes perfect, and you sometimes have to have coping methods. You know, whether it be a hobby or exercise, you need to have coping methods in life to get by, because life is not always going to be pretty. Life is not always going to be easy. There are going to be tough times. That is inevitable. I mean, because like they say, life happens, you know. I utilized some of my coping mechanisms during tough times, such as playing guitar, piano, you know, and writing. I'm an author, published author actually, and I have released albums with my music project Ash District, as well as my solo techno project. I've released an album and 3 EPs, so I've done quite a bit. And when I was growing up, one thing that helped me cope and one thing that did help me have an easier time was playing sports, and I'm really grateful that I was on some really good football teams. And one thing I knew I had to do, and there were times I did get a little laxed, was I had to keep building upon social skills when I was younger, because when you have Asperger's or high functioning autism, you are kind of put at a disadvantage with building social skills, and you have to keep interacting with people, and you have to keep at it, because it will only help you in the long run. And that's how my life was with Asperger's, and I had to change my perspective. Like I mentioned before, I had to change my perspective because, like I said, I'll reiterate, if you don't accept your current situation... Hello, we're back on the second part of my podcast episode about having Asperger's. I'm actually going to keep it pretty brief right here. What I'm saying, and the whole point of this episode, was to help people who have high-functioning autism and to let them know that they can do anything they want as long as they devote themselves and they put their all into it and apply themselves. Because I've learned that when I've done that before with anything I've ever wanted to do, whether it be sports, music, literature, a job or whatever, I was always able to pull it off when I applied myself and I put my all into it. And that's how it goes with Asperger's, and you have to utilize the gifts you have with it too, because you are able to retain information in certain ways that other people can't, such as remembering dates, times, numbers. Numbers seem to be a very popular thing and very typical with people with high-functioning autism, such as myself. I have also learned that through having Asperger's, I am more of a service to other people who have it, because, like I said, this whole episode of my podcast was to give people who have Asperger's and have high-functioning autism hope that they can do anything they want. And this is why I'm doing the podcast, because I wanted to do this, and I got the idea of doing a podcast a couple of months ago or so, and here I am doing it now. I mean, like I said, you kind of have to get over your fears, and it's normal for some people to be afraid of doing something that they haven't done before. Actually, a lot of people are afraid, and not just people who have high-functioning autism. Everybody is afraid to get out of their comfort zone, but just remember, you can't grow if you're not comfortable. And it doesn't matter whether you have autism or not. You still can't grow if you're comfortable. And that's what I've learned over the years. And I hope you took away some knowledge from this episode of my podcast. There will be more episodes to come. And once again, my name is Kevin M. Brandon. And I'm here in Phoenix, Arizona for the time being, in my bedroom right now, which is my studio where I make music and even where I write books and even make drawings and paint. And hope you have a great rest of your day. And since it's Friday, I hope you have a great weekend. Peace.